Welcome, and thank you for joining us in this new edition of our NDC Partnership in Action series of interviews. I'm Cayetano Casado. I'm the Regional Manager for Latin America and the Caribbean at the NDC Partnership Support Unit. This is one of our several dedicated video discussions with country counterparts and key international partners that have a pivotal role in climate change affairs. Our objective is to share perspectives, identify good experiences, elicit challenges and opportunities that countries face moving towards ambitious climate action. We hope that you, our audience, will gain valuable information and context from these discussions, and that you will be inspired as you work towards your own climate actions in your respective countries. Today, we are joined by Dr. Ding Ding from the International Monetary Fund, and we will be talking about the IMF's experience in working with Caribbean countries in dealing with the economic and social impacts caused by the COVID-19 pandemic and in promoting reduction on vulnerability and green growth as part of the recovery packages. Dr. Ding, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Casado. Thank you for having me.
Dr. Ding is the Deputy Division Chief in the Caribbean 1 Division of the IMF's Western Hemisphere Department and is Mission Chief for Saint Lucia. He previously served as the IMF Mission Chief for Kiribati and as an economist for several countries, including Australia, China, and Korea. He has published on a variety of topics, including microfinancial linkages, monetary policy transmission, and international capital flows. He's a Chinese national and holds a PhD in economics from Cornell University. Dr. Ding, to begin the conversation, I think it would be helpful to put the Caribbean into perspective when it comes to climate vulnerability and macroeconomic stability. Just yesterday, the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change released the physical science basis of the much anticipated sixth assessment report. The report shows how the Caribbean is experiencing hotter temperatures, a declining trend in rainfall during the rainy season, and how it's likely that these impacts will intensify and increase aridity and droughts in the future. Climate change is a clear threat. So Dr. Ding, what common vulnerabilities do Caribbean countries share versus external events? How is their stability put in jeopardy, and how have these vulnerabilities been exacerbated by the global pandemic?
Yes, so let me start by saying that every country is different and has its own unique set of challenges. But like you said, in the Caribbean, there are common vulnerabilities faced by the small countries in the region. And some of these vulnerabilities have been exacerbated by the global COVID-19 pandemic. First and foremost, Caribbean countries' heavy reliance on exports, be it tourism or commodities, makes them particularly vulnerable to external shocks, such as the pandemic. Tourism-dependent countries in the region, for example, have seen a large impact of pandemic, some disproportionately large relative to the size of their economies. For most of these countries, the impact goes really beyond just tourism, as other sectors in the economy, such as construction, transportation, and services, are interlinked with the tourism industry. In addition, many countries in the Caribbean, even before the pandemic, had very high public debt. And because of the COVID-19 impact, there has been a significant pickup in the public debt to GDP ratio across the region. According to our calculation, the weighted average debt to GDP ratio in the Caribbean has risen from around 60% in 2019 to more than 70% in 2020. In some countries, this ratio is even above 100%. So the stretch to public indebtedness is really a grave issue for many countries. Given the low economic growth, the limited revenue basis, it may take years of good economic and policy performance for these countries to rebuild fiscal buffers. And last but not least, as you said, climate change is really an ever-present common challenge in the Caribbean. Many of the countries in the region are among the most affected by climate-related natural disasters. Because of the significant impact of COVID-19 pandemic on GDP, on the economy, as well as on public finance, countries will have less resources to respond to climate change, and this will be a major longer-term challenge in the region.
Thank you, Dr. Ding. And What's interesting is that despite these huge challenges and vulnerabilities, Caribbean countries remain committed in the fight against climate change. A couple of weeks ago, Barbados was the most recent Caribbean countries to submit its updated and enhanced NDC, reflecting a considerable increase in climate ambition. I thought it was very interesting that Barbados practically opened the NDC with a chapter on COVID and its impacts on the economy and society of the island. And the document reveals impacts large as the ones you just shared: 40% unemployment, economic activity contraction of 21%. These are definitely daunting figures, but yet Barbados NDC goes all the way to make the case for the need for structural changes and proposes a moving forward better scenario. Now, how can the International Monetary Fund help? What are some of the tools or instruments that the IMF has in its portfolio to support small island development states in the fight against climate change and promoting green recovery?
Thank you for this question. As you know, the mandate of the IMF is to promote stability, reduce vulnerability to crisis, and encourage sustained growth and high living standard in our membership. In that context, we have a suite of financial instruments available to our member countries. First is what we call the emergency financing. This is the resources that can be dispersed rapidly after a external shock, including natural disasters such as the COVID-19 pandemic. To date, the IMF has provided emergency financing of $1 billion US to 8 Caribbean countries in response to the pandemic to limit the impact of the crisis and to catalyze concessional financing from other resources. In addition, as you may have heard, on July 1st, the IMF also approved emergency financing of $11.6 million to St. Vincent and Grenadines to help address the urgent balance of payment needs associated with the eruption of the La Sauveur volcano. Second, we continue working with our members to address debt-related issues, including under the IMF-supported programs. As you know, with the slow recovery in tourism and financing pressure and debt sustainability challenges, some Caribbean countries could face near-term financing pressure. So in this regard, we think that IMF-supported programs can create near-term fiscal space for priority needs, serve as a medium-term anchor to restore growth and sustainability, and again, catalyze external financing. Finally, as you may have heard, the Board of Governors of the IMF has approved a general allocation of the special drawing rights, SDRs, equivalent to $650 billion on August 2nd to boost global liquidity. Now, this general allocation of SDRs will become effective later this month, and it will be distributed according to each member's IMF quota share. And I want to stress that this is really a historic decision, the largest SDR allocation in the history of our institution. And if I can use a metaphor, it's like a shot in the arm for the global economy at a time of unprecedented crisis. So in short, this allocation will benefit all of our members by boosting their foreign reserves, instilling global confidence, and sending a powerful signal of a cooperative multilateral response to this unprecedented crisis. Our members that are liquidity constrained could use the SDR allocation to smooth the needed adjustment and avoid distortionary policies and provide scope for spending on crisis response, such as vaccines and fiscal stimulus to the economy. So for the Caribbean countries as a whole, this allocation will be equivalent to $2.4 billion. If I may, mention two important components in the context of this SDR allocation. Number one, the IMF is engaging actively with our membership to identify viable options for what we call voluntary channeling of SDRs. What it does is it will channel SDR from wealthier and stronger economies to poor and more vulnerable members to support their pandemic recovery and help them achieve resilient and sustainable growth. And the second important initiative in the context of the SDR allocation is that we are also exploring the creation of a new resilience and sustainability trust. What this trust will do is to support resilient and sustainable growth in the post-pandemic period, including resilience to climate change. I mean, we're still developing the modality of the trust and how it can best work support our membership. But the idea is to use this trust to lend at cheaper rates and longer maturities to provide fiscal space for our countries to undertake green reforms and policies. And this could be particularly beneficial for low-income, poor, and vulnerable middle-income countries as they try to make their recovery greener and more sustainable.
Thank you, Dr. Dean. That is very, very interesting and exciting, because it definitely goes to the different calls that these countries have made in different fora. So great to hear this. Could I ask you another question about another tool that you have worked in collaboration with the World Bank in several countries in the Caribbean? These are the climate change policy assessments. If you could perhaps tell us a little bit what these assessments are and what are the main outputs that come from it.
Right. So the climate change policy assessment, the CCPA, it is a joint product between the IMF and the World Bank. And Saint Lucia, which is the country that I've been covering for the last several years, is one of the pilot cases. What the program does is it reviews the policy and institutional framework of member countries' climate change strategy and try to identify gaps where further efforts are warranted or needed to make the framework more comprehensive and more ready to tackle the challenges associated with climate change. So in the case of Saint Lucia, after very close engagement with our members, with the authorities and civil societies and other stakeholders, we were able to identify several areas where the government should consider as a priority going forward when they try to strengthen their national strategy against climate change. For instance, one of these areas is to try to quantify the cost of resilience investment. In many of these island countries, because of their very high vulnerability to climate change, there are many things that they need to do to make their infrastructure stronger, to make their society more ready for natural disasters. And all of these requires resources. Without a good understanding of how much this will cost, sometimes it becomes difficult for not only the government, but also for the development partners to have a comprehensive view on how to best allocate resources and where is the priority spending that should be the focus. So through this CCPA, we were able to identify some of these policy gaps and also financing gaps, and we provided a list of recommendations to the government and to other stakeholders. So what will happen next is really for the governments who have been part of the CCPA to come up with their own strategies in terms of how to implement and incorporate our recommendations in their own policy initiatives. I think the end goal is really to help these countries better prepared for the long-term impact of climate change.
And now that you mentioned green reforms and policies, what would be the IMF's recommendations? And as I understand, as you said at the beginning, each country is its own, But if you could perhaps share with us what key shared entry points or recommendations you would have for Caribbean countries for mainstreaming climate change and reducing their vulnerability, or any best practice that you would like to highlight, please.
Yes. So climate change really, is macro critical in many of the our member countries. So I think one important role that we can play here is to help our member countries internalize the costs and benefits of building resilience against climate change, try to analyze the macroeconomic and the fiscal impact of such investment and what it's going to do to the economy in terms of its long-run impact on growth and living standards and the resilience against climate change and natural disasters. As we know, the intensity and the frequency of natural disasters are increasing steadily over time, which means the risk is also going to intensify. So it's very important for us in our work to have a very good understanding of the long-run impact of climate change and try to come up with policy recommendations that can be implemented now to mitigate this long-run impact. So I want to give you one example. Our teams in the Caribbean divisions have been working with the governments of Dominica and Grenada to prepare a comprehensive disaster resilience strategy, what we call a DRS, in collaboration with our partners at the World Bank. This DRS follows a three-pillar approach, okay, to analyze the costs and benefits of building structural, financial, and social resilience against natural disasters. What this framework does is to internalize resilience building in the macro fiscal frameworks, and then it can help identify financing needs and provide really a roadmap for policy design and sequencing. And because we can present the costs and benefits of building resilience, this will also help promote coordinated donor support in these countries. As we know, anyone who has worked on climate change issues will tell you that a key challenge is to quantify the impact of climate change and try to identify finances that can be used, can be mobilized to build resilience against such risks. So hope by implementing this comprehensive disaster resilience strategy, we can help governments to have a coherent and comprehensive view to quantify really the costs and benefits of building resilience against climate change. And our experience from these pilot DRS programs in Dominica and Grenada has been very positive. The DRS has become part of the Dominican government's budget and also our emergency financing program for the country. And the experience that we learned from these pilot programs will also be a very important input for our future work on climate change. Let me also add that the IMF is rethinking its approach to climate change to benefit its full membership, including small states and including countries in the Caribbean. So in that context, how best to support climate change adaptation and mitigation in collaboration with our development partners is a key work program that we will continue working with our membership and partners in the future. We're trying to develop a coherent strategy that is fully consistent with the IMF's mandate, and we'll try to implement this strategy in our surveillance work, in our capacity development, and also in our lending to our membership.
That's excellent, Dr. Dean. Thank you for that explanation. And with this, we've reached the end of the interview. So I want to thank you for accompanying us today, for so persuasively sharing your vision and the tools that the IMF has to offer countries in the Caribbean and beyond. And we hope that with this information will be of use for other countries. And to our audience, thank you very much for joining and wish you a wonderful day.
Thank you. Thank you very much.